Hello and welcome to the next Bible study from Genesis. This week I'm going to start on Abraham. Probably won't be able to resist going to a bit more detail on Abraham. He's a character that I love. I'm recording outside and I hope that the wind doesn't pick up too much and sort of damage the sound, but we'll see how we go. The wind is coming and going here. So today I want to do a bit more of it's a bit of a Bible study, really. And I made a few notes because what I want us to be able to get a grip on in this study is something about Abraham's background and that initial bit of the journey. Now, when you read the scriptures, it's not quite clear some of the parts of the journey, but we're going to do our best to piece it all together. So the story picks up in Genesis 11, and you've got this statement we mentioned before where it says, this is the account of Terah. Terah being the father of Abraham, or Abram as he was known then. And I love that name, Terah. You know, who wants a father called Terah? Yeah, that's something that would cause you to need a bit of heart healing probably later on. So his father's called Terah. And when you read this passage and it's the second part of Genesis 11, verse 20, 20, I was just looking where it begins, sort of 24, 25 onwards. You find that Terah, when he's 70 years old, he becomes the father of Abram, Nahor, and Haran. And then he goes on and gives some of the other details. And then we find that in verse 31, it says that Terah took his son Abraham, his grandson Lot, the son of Haran, and off they went together. They set out from Ur of Chaldeans to go to Canaan. But when they arrived at Haran, they settled there. Now, the bits that aren't totally clear here in this bit of the journey is what is actually going on. Because elsewhere, if you want to piece a few bits together, if you go into Acts 7, and you got there the whole story when Stephen is preaching the gospel at full belt just before he died, he refers to Abraham, and he refers to Abraham in the context of when he encountered God, that God spoke to him and told him to leave his family and leave the place he knew and set out on a journey. And this encounter with God is clear from Acts 7, is a moment that brings separation from, or should bring separation in an earthly way. He's setting out to a place where he doesn't know where he's going, and it speaks of no earthly inheritance. And then it says that he'll be a stranger in the land, and it speaks really of the journey. And it's really interesting that right back here in Genesis, you've got a character who is prophetically living out some of the features that are relevant in our own Christian walk and walk with God. It's like when you look at it, you realize that we're called to be journeyers on earth. And yeah, we belong to earth. We're here on earth. We have our expression on earth, but our citizenship is in heaven. So we're actually journeyers. We're going through, we're passing through on our journey to eternity. The second bit you pick up here is about inheritance. Yes, we have a benefit on earth, and in some senses, in many senses, we have an inheritance on earth, but the fullness of the inheritance that we have is actually found in eternity with the Father. And the third bit is when you're born again, there is a separation that happens. We move from the kingdom of darkness to the kingdom of light. And there's this shift of kingdoms. There's this shift of where we belong and who we belong to. So just want you to grab those really as little background thoughts here, and as we build our picture. Another reference, and I'll look this one up, if you go into Hebrews 11 and verse 8 onwards, talks about Abraham, and it says, by faith Abraham, when called to go to a place he would later receive as his inheritance, obeyed and went, even though he didn't know where he was going. So that's a statement of faith. By faith, he made his home in the promised land like a stranger in a foreign country. He lived in tents. So you got this part that he's not put his firm foundations on earth, but he's a journeyer. And it says, for he's looking forward to the city with foundations whose architect and builder was God. He'd seen something of the heavenly city, which was, just incredible. So here we have this man of faith that there are so many lessons and things that we can learn about him and learn from him. And I want to pick up one other verse and then just pull this bit of picture together for us so that maybe we get a better idea of what's going on. And this is actually in Joshua 24, and it's verse 2. And Joshua is speaking to the people, and he says, this is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says. Long ago, your ancestors, including Terah, the father of Abraham and Nahor, lived beyond the Euphrates River and worshipped other gods. But I took your father Abraham from the land beyond the Euphrates and led him throughout Canaan and gave him many descendants. So you can see here the journey. So Abraham's father was a worshipper of idols, and Haran and the place that he stopped and where he died was also known as a place of idol worship. So Abraham's culture was he wasn't in a culture where people were worshiping God. So he had to break out of that culture. And it's a challenge for many, many people today when they take a step in their Christian faith and they're having to break out of long held family cultural things. And sometimes family cultural things can be the very things that hold us back from fully engaging and fully flowing with God. And we have to watch that. So here, when you read in end of Genesis 11 into Genesis 12, it looks like Terah is leading the way. But I think behind it, you realize from that passage in Acts that actually Abraham had already had an encounter with God. And in this encounter with God, the command to him was to leave his family behind. And it really begins a journey for him, because it looks to me like, even though he was told to leave everyone behind, Abraham set out with them. In fact, Terah becomes the lead in that journey, which would be natural in that culture. And it was Terah that brings the settling somewhere that wasn't in line to the calling that was in Abraham's heart. So when you look at the ages of different people, and again, it's difficult to decipher everything, but it looks like Terah gave birth to, well, not him, his wife gave birth to Abraham when he was about 70 years old. And then it's 75 years old in Genesis 12, where God speaks to Abraham again. And I think there's a whole ongoing separation here where Abraham is having to go on a journey that goes beyond where his family would go. And even at that point, as we'll see, Abraham doesn't leave everyone behind. I'm going to pick up the story in Genesis 12 just for a moment. So God appears to Abraham again in Genesis 12. This isn't the first time he's had this encounter. And one of the marks of Abraham's life are these moments of encounter with God. And I think there's something about encountering God that causes that separation in our hearts from earthly things and a locking into heavenly things to grow and to develop. And so, I just want to encourage you here. Keep encountering God and allow each encounter with God to make you more aware of heavenly things and less tied down in the wrong sense to earthly things. Now we look at Genesis 12. So hopefully you've picked up this picture of Abraham. It wasn't an easy start. There were challenges he had to overcome. There were challenges in hearing God. And when he heard God, he had to overcome to walk into his destiny. So in Genesis 12, it says, the Lord says to Abraham, go from your country, your people, and your father's household to the land I'll show you. Now, I'm assuming here that Abraham's on the move before his father died, but it's possible also, when you read the scriptures, it's possible he could be leaving at the point his father died. But he had to break through and listen to God and break through at this point. And he had a promise that he was given, that he would be a great nation and he would And God said, I will bless you. I will make your name great, and you will be a blessing. So God's speaking into his heart, something prophetic. And Abraham at this point has no evidence. Again, if you look at the end of the previous chapter, we're told in verse 30, Genesis 11, verse 30, Sarah or Sarai was childless because she was not able to conceive. So the journey that Abraham's on is, it's just impossible for him to fulfill his destiny without further impact moments from heaven. So Abraham, he's got his promise. He's going to be a nation. Yeah, but the promise is more than that. The promise is that God's going to bless him. And when I read that, I'll just read the next verse. It says, I will bless those who bless you, and whoever curses you, I will curse. And all peoples on earth will be blessed through you. And so Abraham, or Abraham as he was known then, sets out on his journey. And as he sets out on his journey, he hasn't at this point let go of everything that he needs to let go of. He gets hold of Lot, and Lot goes on the journey with him. So in that sense, Abraham is still taking family baggage with him. And we'll see later how Lot causes a bit of trouble for Abraham. So here's the core I want us to get hold of here, that God speaks and Abraham's going to be blessed. And it gets me thinking, and one of my favorite prayers for myself and for people is to pray that God will bless them and pray that God will keep them. So today, my prayer for you is I pray that God will bless you. I pray that God will keep you. I pray that God will guard you, and that the blessing of God will be so in your life, it'll overflow to those around you, and that those that bless you will be blessed. And there'll be constant increase, that you and your children and your children's children will know the blessing of God in every way. And so as Abraham sets out on this journey, he's leaving stuff behind, but it's a journey of faith and an incredible journey. And we'll pick up some more things next time. But I want to, as I draw to a close here, remember for us, like Abraham, we're journeyers through this land. We're not residents. When we know we're journeyers, it affects how we live. We live in some senses with a temporary mindset, because we know we're heading somewhere. And where are we heading? We've got our eyes, in Abraham's case, he said he saw the city. We see our Father in heaven. We see Jesus enthroned in heaven. And that our goal is heavenward. And again, when it talks about the race, we race with perseverance, forgetting what is behind, pressing on for what's ahead. There's quite a lot of stuff in there. And I know I'm probably going into more details than I intended in this start of this Genesis study here. I'm like, Abraham's worth a little bit of time so we can learn and grow from a bit of his story. Hope you have a great week. And above all, I'm praying that you'll know the blessing of God. And let this be a week where there'll be tokens of his love in your life that will be forming, because you know that he's seen you and he's looking over you. Bless you. Have a great week.